time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely. Well, for a start, the only time that I've come back to the UK is...
Prince Harry expected tension when he entered Buckingham Palace, but he did not expect to discover that 3 letters once attached to his royal identity had vanished. Not from one document, not from one ceremonial list, from every internal palace record placed before him. Within minutes, what began as an uncomfortable return became something far more personal. Harry was confronting evidence that the institution had formally rewritten how it would recognize him. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry entered the palace expecting cold smiles, measured words, and strain around King Charles and Prince William. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's official London residence and royal workplace, had always represented continuity to him. That was why the first folder placed before him felt so unsettling. He expected distance from his family. He did not expect to find his own royal identity altered on paper. Harry opened the updated access file and stopped almost immediately there. Beside his name, the HRH styling was gone. HRH means His Royal Highness, a formal royal style used for senior royals. He checked another page, then another. Palace directories, ceremonial records, internal briefing sheets, seating archives, administrative references. Every active record carried the same change. His name remained. The 3 letters did not. Harry read the first page twice, before looking at the aide across from him. "Is this an error?" he asked. The official did not rush to answer. That pause sharpened the silence. Then came the explanation. The records had been intentionally standardized under a new directive, meaning palace departments had been instructed to use one consistent form of address across current internal material. The answer hit harder than Harry expected. Losing duties had been one thing. Losing military roles had been painful, but those belonged to service. This felt different. He remembered a lifetime in which those letters had followed his name through ceremonies, programs, formal introductions, and family milestones. Now the palace that had once reinforced that identity appeared to be quietly separating itself from it. Harry searched through the remaining folders for one exception. There was none. Even working copies used by staff had been changed. He finally pushed the file away and asked who had authorized the decision. The official lowered his voice. The instruction, he said, had come through the highest level of palace administration. Harry closed the folder. "I want to speak to my father." Then another fact landed. William already knew. The missing letters had shocked Harry, but learning that his own brother had been aware of their removal transformed humiliation into something far more dangerous: betrayal. The deepest wound was not the altered paperwork. It was the realization that the people closest to Harry's royal past had already discussed his future without him. William knew. Charles had been briefed. Senior staff had prepared for the consequences. Harry alone had walked into Buckingham Palace, unaware that an administrative decision carrying enormous emotional weight had already been completed behind closed doors. Harry had stepped away from senior royal duties, but leaving the job had never erased the family history attached to him. The monarchy was not simply an institution he once served. It had shaped his childhood, his identity, and the way the world had known him since birth. William saw the system differently. As heir to the throne, the prince increasingly treated titles, styles, access, and official records as parts of a constitutional structure, meaning the framework that separates family ties from public royal responsibilities. Harry moved through the corridor outside the private offices with anger building. He stopped an equerry, a royal household official who assists royals, and asked one question: had William been consulted? The aide hesitated. That pause told Harry more than a polished explanation could. His brother had known, and Harry had not. Charles carried a different burden. The king understood that Harry was still his son, yet he also believed the monarchy could not survive endless confusion over who represented the crown and who did not. That distinction mattered because palace records were not sentimental keepsakes. Current internal files guided staff, ceremonies, access, and official protocol. Still, Charles knew administrative clarity could feel like rejection when the name being changed belonged to his own child. Harry soon learned the decision had been prepared across several departments at once. Staff had been instructed to update active directories, briefing material, access references, and ceremonial paperwork together, so the old styling could not reappear through habit. The scale disturbed him. This had not been one clerk correcting one line, it had been coordinated. William had pushed hardest against exceptions. According to the internal briefing Harry was shown, the future king believed leaving private palace references untouched would create another argument the moment one department used the old style and another did not. Consistency, in his view, would prevent confusion. To Harry, it sounded like his brother had helped close every escape route. Charles sat alone with the final briefing note before Harry was brought upstairs. He read his son's name, placed the paper face down, and stayed silent. The hesitation exposed the cost. The decision remained. Yet this was not simply cold administration, because one specific royal encounter had convinced the palace that the old compromise could no longer survive. Every palace rupture has a moment that looks insignificant until history turns back toward it. For Harry, that moment came weeks earlier during a private ceremonial briefing at Windsor. What happened there lasted only minutes, involved no shouting, and never reached the public. Yet one disagreement over how Harry should be formally introduced convinced William that the monarchy was living with a contradiction it could no longer avoid. Harry had lived for years inside an uneasy compromise. He remained royal by birth, but he no longer served as a senior working member of the family. The HRH style, meaning His Royal Highness, still existed historically beside his name, even though it was not used in the same active way. Older palace records reflected one era, while newer material increasingly reflected another. That split mattered, because staff needed one clear standard whenever current ceremonies, access, or official duties were involved. William finally challenged that ambiguity during a private Windsor briefing. An official draft introduced Harry using the HRH styling for an upcoming palace function. The prince stopped the discussion and asked why a designation no longer used in active royal life was appearing in current ceremonial material. Harry immediately pushed back. He said the wording described who he was by birth, not whether he held a working role that day. Charles tried to soften the collision before it hardened. The king suggested keeping the wording for that single event while reviewing the wider policy later. Harry heard hesitation where he wanted loyalty. William heard another temporary fix, where he believed the monarchy needed clarity. Neither son raised his voice, but the tension sharpened, because both men understood the argument was no longer about one line on one draft. Harry left Windsor frustrated, but William stayed behind. Once the advisors had gone quiet, the future king spoke directly to his father. He said the palace could not keep treating the same title as active in one room, historical in another, and irrelevant somewhere else. Eventually, someone had to decide whether the HRH existed operationally, inside the monarchy, or only as part of Harry's past. Charles did not answer at once. He moved away from the table, stood in silence, then turned back toward his secretary. A private secretary is the senior aide who manages a royal's official work and confidential correspondence. The king gave one instruction: prepare the options. That sentence changed everything. Weeks later, those options had become policy. The private disagreement at Windsor had become the hidden trigger behind the revised files at Buckingham Palace. Now Harry was no longer arguing about wording. He was preparing to confront the father who had approved its removal. In this dramatized account, Harry enters the king's private room without offering a greeting. The folder remains tight in his hand. Charles understands immediately what his son has found, and for several seconds, neither man moves toward the safety of small talk. Then Harry places the file on the desk and asks the question that has been building since the moment he saw his altered name. Was I ever going to be told? Charles holds his son's stare before answering. To him, the change is administrative consistency, a way of making current palace records match the reality of Harry's non-working royal role. Administrative consistency simply means using the same rule across official systems instead of allowing different departments to apply different forms of address. The king believes Harry's bloodline, family place, and personal history remain untouched. Harry hears something colder. If the palace that shaped his childhood can change the way it formally recognizes him, then the distinction between paperwork and identity feels almost meaningless. Harry refuses to let the explanation settle. He tells his father that finding out through a file made the decision feel deliberate, almost surgical. Charles says there was no plan to humiliate him publicly. The king insists the change was meant to remove confusion, not dignity. But Harry pushes back. A private decision can still wound, he says, especially when everyone except the person affected seems to know it is coming. Charles finally gives him the answer he has been demanding. He personally approved the final implementation after reviewing competing recommendations. One group wanted historical palace material left untouched. William argued that current records should follow one consistent standard, without private exceptions that could recreate the same dispute later. The king explains this calmly, but Harry hears his brother's influence inside every sentence. Harry asks the question that changes the room. Will you reverse it? Charles does not look away. No. The answer lands with more force than the explanation before it. Harry rises abruptly, the chair shifting behind him, while his father tells him to sit down. He refuses. The anger is no longer scattered across staff, files, or palace procedure. It has found a direction. Harry grips the back of the chair and asks one final thing. If the decision is permanent, who pushed hardest for it? Charles hesitates only briefly this time. William. Harry says nothing. He takes the folder, turns toward the door, and leaves with a different kind of fury. He had entered the room angry at palace machinery. He leaves focused on one person, the brother whose influence over the monarchy is becoming impossible to ignore. And that realization makes the next meeting unavoidable now. William never needed to sign the final order to shape its outcome. His power came from something subtler, proximity to the future. Every major palace decision now carried a second calculation. Not only what worked for Charles today, but what the next king would inherit tomorrow. Harry's status had become trapped inside that transition, turning a family dispute into a test of who now defined the boundaries of royal life. William had grown increasingly involved in decisions about the monarchy's long-term structure. As heir, meaning the person first in line to inherit the throne, his role reached far beyond ceremonies and public appearances. He was being drawn into questions about who actively represented the crown, how royal titles were used, and whether private exceptions weakened public rules. To him, credibility depended on consistency. If Harry had stepped outside the working institution, William believed palace systems could not continue treating him as though nothing had changed. Harry saw that logic as punishment dressed as order. William knew it. Before entering a scheduled briefing, the prince stopped an aide and asked whether his brother had already seen the revised records. The answer came quickly. Yes. Harry had seen everything. William's face tightened. He did not smile, and he did not treat the news like a victory. Whatever bitterness existed between the brothers, he understood what those missing letters touched. They belonged to childhood memories, family ceremonies, and years when both sons of Diana had moved through royal life under the same inherited identity. The future king could defend the policy and still understand the wound. William had nevertheless insisted on one condition. The revision had to apply everywhere in current palace use. No ceremonial exception when Harry attended a family event. No private restoration inside a royal residence. No department quietly using the old style because a staff member preferred tradition. William believed exceptions would only recreate the argument later, perhaps at an even more damaging moment. Charles eventually accepted that reasoning. The king possessed the authority to approve the change, but William's demand for consistency gave the decision its real strength. Partial enforcement could be reversed through habit. Complete enforcement created a new normal. Then William's phone moved in his hand. Harry wanted to see him privately. William read the message twice, locked the screen, and looked toward the aides waiting nearby. Clear the next 20 minutes. The staff left. For the first time since Harry had entered Buckingham Palace, there would be no officials, no folders, and no royal machinery between the two brothers. The true force of the decision becomes visible only after Harry leaves the king's office. One alteration begins appearing everywhere he looks. His security paperwork uses a different form of address. An updated seating document lists him simply by his ducal title. A staff directory reflects the same change. None of these details is dramatic alone. Together, they create the sensation that an entire institution has moved forward without him. For Harry, repetition makes the loss feel deliberate, permanent, and personal. Harry moves through the palace, with the revised files now following him from room to room. Palace departments have aligned their current paperwork so every active record uses the same standard. That matters because these documents guide access, schedules, ceremonies, and staff communication. Historical records remain untouched as part of the past, but current material reflects the new rule. Harry can still find the old styling behind him. He can no longer find it in front of him. Harry accepts a revised itinerary from an aide and scans the page. An itinerary is the official schedule showing where a royal is expected to be and when. His eyes stop at his own name. The old style is missing again. He says nothing. Instead, he folds the paper once, slowly, and keeps it in his hand. The anger that carried him out of Charles's room begins to drain away. What replaces it is quieter and harder to hide. Charles hears about that reaction almost immediately. The king starts toward the corridor, then stops before reaching the door. He knows his son is hurting, but he also knows another conversation now could become another argument. Charles remains where he is, torn between the instinct to follow Harry as a father and the knowledge that he has just defended the decision as monarch. Harry soon notices something even more final. Routine palace communication templates have been rewritten too. A template is the standard format staff use repeatedly for letters, schedules, and internal notices. The change was not designed only to make a statement. It was designed to prevent the old designation from returning by accident. Harry is nearly ready to leave when a senior courtier approaches him. The official says William has requested a private meeting before he goes. Harry refuses at first. Nothing his brother says, he believes, can restore what has been removed. Harry reaches the palace exit and places one hand on the door handle. Then he stops. 5 minutes, he tells the waiting aide. He turns around. That decision becomes the emotional pivot of everything. Because behind the next closed door, Harry will finally hear what William could never say through palace paperwork. There are no private secretaries in the room. No folders. No constitutional advisors. Just two brothers carrying decades of shared memories and years of accumulated resentment. Harry enters prepared for another defensive protocol, but William does not begin with rules. He begins with something far more difficult. He tells Harry that the decision was never intended to erase his place in the family, and admits he knew it would feel exactly that way. William chooses his words carefully because the distinction matters. Harry remains his brother, his father's son, and part of the family's personal history, but his operational place inside the monarchy is different. Operational status simply means the role someone actively performs within the working royal system. The prince argues that mixing family identity with official function has repeatedly created confusion, anger, and public conflict. Harry listens, but the explanation does not soften what happened. Harry answers with the point he has been carrying all day. William can separate identity from status because his own royal position has never been threatened. The future king does not respond immediately. The remark cuts deeper than the arguments about files, because it forces him to confront an imbalance neither brother can escape. One was born to inherit the institution. The other now feels the institution has learned how to continue without him. William finally admits something Harry did not expect. He should have warned him personally before the records were changed. The prince does not apologize for supporting the decision itself, and Harry notices the difference. But he does acknowledge that allowing his brother to discover it through palace paperwork was wrong. That admission does not erase the wound, yet for the first time the conversation stops sounding like policy and starts sounding like family. Harry asks whether William expects him to accept the new reality. His brother answers that acceptance is not the point. Clarity is. Every disagreement between them cannot keep becoming a battle over who belongs, who represents the crown, or whose version of royal life should survive. The prince believes their relationship has no chance of healing if every private grievance becomes another fight over status. Harry realizes the course will not change. William will not reverse his position, and the palace will not restore the old wording. But he also understands something else. This meeting is not a victory speech. His brother knows the decision hurt him. Harry reaches the door, pauses, then turns back. "You should have told me." William looks at him. "I know. Nothing is repaired, but something shifts." And while the brothers leave that room with a painful new understanding, the palace can no longer contain what happened. Outside its gates, 3 missing letters are about to become a national spectacle. By the following morning, a private palace decision has become a public symbol, Commentators argue over protocol, loyalty, family, and consequence. Some see overdue clarity. Others see an unnecessary humiliation of the king's younger son. But one image captures the entire controversy better than any debate. Harry leaving Buckingham Palace alone while newspapers prepare front pages built around 3 letters that are suddenly nowhere beside his name. Charles reads the morning coverage in silence. The debate has split quickly because royal styling, the formal way members of the monarchy are addressed, carries meaning beyond etiquette. Supporters argue that titles should match active royal responsibility. Critics say the palace could have created consistency without turning Harry's identity into a public spectacle. The king understands both arguments, and that is exactly what makes the coverage harder to dismiss. Charles reaches one headline and stops. Camilla notices before he says anything. The queen consort watches him fold the newspaper inward until Harry's photograph disappears from view. She does not press him. He does not explain, but the gesture says enough. The monarch may defend the decision publicly, yet the father inside him is carrying its cost. Outside Buckingham Palace, the story becomes impossible to contain. Television crews line the pavement, while a crowd gathers behind the barriers. One leading morning paper displays Harry leaving the gates beneath a stark headline, 3 letters gone. The image becomes the defining symbol of the day, reducing years of family tension, royal duty, and institutional change into one brutal phrase. Harry watches part of the coverage privately. He listens as commentators argue over whether the palace acted with necessary clarity or needless cruelty. Then he switches the television off before the discussion ends. What had felt like a private wound now belongs to strangers. His frustration deepens because the public is debating something he is still trying to understand personally. William faces pressure to explain his role, but the prince refuses to issue a statement. His silence is deliberate. The future king believes further comment would reopen a decision the palace considers settled. For Harry, that silence confirms the new boundary. For Charles, it creates one final problem that policy cannot solve. Later that evening, Charles picks up the telephone and calls his son directly. He is not calling as sovereign. He is not calling as sovereign. He is not calling as a father. For both men, that difference makes the coming conversation dangerous, because neither can retreat behind palace language. The country can debate titles indefinitely, but the final meaning of this moment will be decided in a private conversation, where neither Charles nor Harry can hide behind the crown. The final conversation does not restore the letters. It does something more difficult. Charles tells Harry plainly that the palace decision will stand, but he refuses to let an administrative designation become the final definition of their relationship. Harry does not suddenly forgive everything, nor does the king pretend the damage is insignificant. Instead, father and son confront the truth they had avoided all day. Royal identity and family belonging are no longer the same thing. Charles explains why he believes the monarchy needed one consistent answer. Harry's operational status means the official role he actively holds within the working royal system, separate from his private place in the family. The king argues that contradictory references across palace records would keep creating confusion over duties, titles, ceremonies, and representation. Harry disagrees with how the decision was handled, but he finally accepts that the ruling itself will not change. Harry then tells his father what hurt most. Losing the letters was painful, but discovering the change through paperwork was worse. Charles listens without interrupting. The monarch admits that the family allowed procedure to move faster than the personal conversation. He should have spoken to his son earlier. Harry does not offer instant forgiveness, but the anger in his voice begins to ease because, at last, the wound itself has been acknowledged. Charles gives him one final assurance. No palace database, internal record, or administrative order can remove Harry from the family into which he was born. The king tells him that titles can define responsibility, but they cannot rewrite blood or shared history. Harry remains silent for several seconds. When he answers, his voice is calmer than it was inside Buckingham Palace, and Charles stays seated after the call ends, holding the telephone before slowly placing it down. Harry closes the revised palace file elsewhere and puts it away without opening it again. Neither man believes the decision will be reversed. That certainty hurts, but it also ends the ambiguity that had poisoned every conversation surrounding the issue. William's part is settled too. His demand for consistency has hardened the monarchy's institutional boundary, yet his private admission to Harry showed that authority had not erased brotherhood. Harry entered Buckingham Palace believing 3 letters still connected his past to his present. He leaves knowing the crown has drawn a permanent line, but family remains beyond it. The chapter closes decisively. Harry remains a son, a brother, a prince by birth, and part of royal history. The institution has changed how it recognizes his role, not where he came from. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.